The Town were condemned to successive relegations after a, quite frankly, embarrassing afternoon of football at the Hawthorns on Saturday when we went down 5-3 to West Brom. Alongside me to dissect it all, I've got the Lutonian journalist James Cunliffe and Town fan Tom Watts. Gents, this is the podcast we didn't want to record.
Let's just get on with it, shall we?
As the man says, we'll get on with it right after this intro. Hello everyone, welcome along to another episode of the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast, the award-winning, longest-running Luton Town podcast, having scooped bronze in the Best Football League podcast category in the Football Content Awards. This season, the show is in association with Solid, providing opportunities, provisions and assistance so our academy can fulfil their potential. As I mentioned prior to the intro, we're looking back on an afternoon which will not live in the memory whatsoever, as the Town fell to a 5-3 defeat against West Bromwich Albion, which condemned us to League One football next season. And I've got the Lutonian journalist James Cunliffe and the person who I've been quoting as Twats LTFC on this podcast because of his YouTube handle, but is actually Tom Watts. Tom, good to have you on board with us. Really appreciate you coming in and giving your thoughts, particularly as this probably isn't going to be a particularly positive podcast. But what did you make of yesterday and the season as a whole, really?
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Hard to say, really. Yesterday, I feel like I've already gone through the 5 stages of grief, already kind of accepting that we need a complete overhaul of the club this summer, which I think will be a very large overhaul. I think if we don't get out the first time of asking, we could be here for a good few number of years. It's a hard league to get out of. There's a lot of big teams. But for me, overall from the season, I'd say it stems from the board, and I'd say naivety. That's probably the one word I'd say for this season, is the naivety, thinking we'd just bounce straight back up.
Hard to disagree, really, Jimbo. I mean, let's do the game first and then the season after. No one wants to lose. No one wants to be relegated. There are ways to do both, and yesterday was not it. Was absolutely not it. I looked a few times over to that sideline to make sure it was Matt there and not Rob, because there was so much of that reminded me of a Rob Edwards performance this season than a Matt Bloomfield one. It was untrue.
Yeah, and the game was over at half time, and I mean, I can't tell you what happened in the second half. I was there, but I wasn't watching it. I was just watching the other games and praying for Portsmouth to do something because it was over, and that's criminal. Really, it's negligent in a game where you had 2 opportunities to stay in the league. You win or you draw based on the results that actually happened, and you get thumped for 5 goals. The 3 is irrelevant, really, that we scored because it was 5-1 at one point. You can't expect to come back from that, and this team can't expect to either. I mean, the fact that they scored 3 is amazing, but they haven't got the firepower. But we'd gone into this with defence being really solid. And the evidence of the last 2 months gave everyone really positivity and hope. And you can only go on that evidence. So where the return of the bad old days came from on the day that you least needed it, I don't know. You can pick over it all you want. I mean, ask questions, but I didn't get any answers because I'm not sure anyone can quantify what happened yesterday.
No, I mean, there will be a time for the answers, won't there? Because everyone who was in that away end yesterday, who's been in an away end throughout this wretched away season, and those that have attended home games and watched on from afar have been let down by people, but they've been let down by players on the pitch at times. They've been let down by people off of the pitch. And ultimately, yes, we can't change what has happened now. Our fate is sealed for League One. But what we can do is make sure that these mistakes don't happen again. Let's start with yesterday's team. Tom, were you surprised at the 11 that was picked? Just the one change, Jordan Clark in for Lamine Fanny. Speaking to lots of people on the concourse yesterday, and I know you couldn't get a ticket, you was watching on TV, so they might have also have shared this, but there was a lot of surprise that Cal Naismith wasn't in that starting 11.
I kind of wasn't surprised going from previous matches, and the team had back done 3 wins on the trot. So I kind of was half expecting it to be the same team. The only other thing I would have thought was maybe bring Naismith or something on in the game later if we were winning and we needed to hold out. Do you want someone with a little bit more experience to help see the game out rather than putting on a youngster who might be overawed by the occasion? But no, team-wise, I thought it was probably what I expected, to be honest.
Where was you, Jimbo? Because you made a point about Naismith for Fanny in the preview. You were surprised not to see Naismith? I mean, obviously we saw him 6 minutes from the end and, you know, we could see that he was pissed off. Excuse my French. I apologise if there is a lot of swearing on this podcast. Clearly we're still pretty emotional here. He was, wasn't he? Because the first thing he did was started thundering into tackles, and that's not really Cal Naismith, but he'd obviously watched on from the sidelines and was as annoyed by what he saw as the rest of us.
Very surprised. I think that team needed a leader, and he was that leader. And when he's come on and needed to do a job, he's done it. When he stayed on the pitch, that is. And he could have played in defence or he could have played in midfield, and it wouldn't have made a difference. He's been good in either of those positions that he's been in. But I don't see that the capitulation that happened at the Hawthorns happens with Cal Naismith on the pitch. I just don't. You know, they may still have lost because there was failings all over the place and there was underperformance all over the place. But I think, you know, after the second goal, the DK goal, I think that's the time that a leader gets those players together and has a word of them, because it wasn't like it came out of the blue. It was coming all the time. They were absolutely rampant. All this talk about, and I know we said stop talking about this team, West Brom, being on the beach. But if they were on the beach, they were on the Copacabana, because we allowed them to play like Brazil.
We did. Yeah. All this talk about teams being on the beach, I did reference it in the preview, maybe so. But on the last day of a season, when you're at home, you have a duty to your home fans to perform, and they did. And unfortunately, we've copped the full brunt of it. I mean, whether you have a leader on the pitch or not, gents, the one thing you do need is your senior players to make sure they stand up and be counted on the afternoon. And unfortunately, the first goal, the senior players have let us down a little bit there. I mean, we've let Fellows, who, it's a good player, Tom Fellows. I really like him. When I've seen West Brom this season and last season when we weren't in the league, he was one of the more impressive players, but he's not Lamine Yamal. But we made him look like Lamine Yamal yesterday. We couldn't get within 10 yards of the bloke. He could go inside, he could go outside, he could put a cigar on, he could do absolutely anything he wanted yesterday, and we weren't going to stop him. He doesn't cut inside, he comes on the outside. I have absolutely no idea why Kaminsky thinks that shot's going to his right-hand side. There's 3 defenders in the line of his right-hand side. If it gets through there, then put your hands up and good luck to you. Can only hit it where he hits it. I'm sorry, but, and I know, and this is harsh because Kaminsky's had a tough time, right? But ultimately, this is a ruthless business and we've been relegated. He has to keep that first shot out. He just has to. It's straight at him. You can't be beaten near post side. No goalkeeper can be beaten that side.
No, the other scene we gave Fellows so much space, and after playing and doing a little bit of coaching myself, is you either got to stop the ball getting to him in the first place or you have to stick on him. We were so narrow. I don't think our wing-backs went wider than our 18-yard box. We were so narrow. We were inviting them to get the ball wide and just keep pumping crosses. And yeah, I think Sky came up with a stat that in the first 15 minutes, 65% of attacks were down our right-hand side.
And I'm not surprised because Darnell Furlong's decent enough as a right-back as well, isn't he? He backs him up. And then if we do happen to stop the ball, they'll launch a long throw-in into the middle of your box. But that first goal was warning sign, really, wasn't it? Because, I don't want to keep on using the word embarrassing because it's not a word I like to use about my football club that I care deeply for. But when you're looking at it from a defensive point of view, in a game of that magnitude, that's exactly what it was.
I don't think you can shape it any other way, really. In a game of professional football, once you get past 4s, 5s, 6s and beyond that, that's pretty bad. In any game, even if there's nothing particularly riding on it, but when the stakes are that high and you've got all the chances to stay in that division, which is, win or draw, and you stay in that division and you get and you're down 3-1 at half time, and then by the hour it's 5. That's not acceptable. At some point along there, you need a leader. You need somebody to tell them that it's not acceptable and rally them around, and in some way maybe just make it hard for 10 minutes, because they were rampant, but they didn't. And you can see that many goals, you're not getting back into it. This team was not getting back into it. It was game over at half time. Everybody knew it. And, hoping for favours elsewhere. Well, we've been hoping for that for 2 months, because we've been the third most informed team in this division after Leeds and Burnley. 2 teams that have got 100 points in this division. This is all based on the previous 10 games. That's phenomenal form. That's the evidence you need to show that this team should have done better than what they were doing yesterday. Not even just done better than what they did yesterday. It shouldn't have been at all a problem. And they made it a problem themselves. And it's really hard to take. And I don't think there's been no answers really as to why. I don't think that we'll get them.
It feels hard right now to look and find positives, Tom, but there is a positive within this squad, Amari'i, and his response to that, conceding that opening goal, was absolutely fantastic. Asgard gets the ball down, plays him in down the left-hand side. I think it's Bartley who he was up against, who he tied in knots. And once he cut inside, sometimes this season, our forward players have lacked composure. Their final product has been really, really poor. He hasn't got that. He's got the confidence of a guy who, to hell with what's going on, I'm going to do my bit and get us back in this game. And he curled a lovely ball into the bottom corner. And at 1-1 then, having had that real blow, you're kind of in the away, and then you're standing up and you think, thank God for that, we finally turned up.
You think you kind of got away with it then, with the shaky start, and you think that's where it comes down to, like I said, leadership, and you need someone to drag them by the collar and go, next 10 minutes, settle it down. We've got 80 more minutes to play. It's not over yet. We can still settle down. But yeah, going to Amari'i, Asgard, they're the players we need to be building League One around, because especially as they've just been doing it in the first half of the season in League One.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, Amari'i should be the unsung hero of this season, shouldn't he? Because I've got to be honest, I'd never heard of the kid until he rocked up on January the 28th or whatever it was when we signed him, even though he was doing well at Exeter. His name wasn't one that I've crossed paths with in reports or anything like that. But he is the guy who should be celebrating keeping us in the division. It was his goal at Stoke that got us the point. It was his winner at Derby that got us the 3 points. And that goal yesterday should have been more than enough to. And if it wasn't, his second one certainly should have been more than enough to keep us in the division. So it's disappointing, really. A few minutes after his equaliser, Hull took the lead. And then you're kind of like, oh, God, now we're relying on someone else's result to go our way rather than the whole one. And within minutes of that happening, an embarrassing second goal. I keep on using this word. I'm sorry, folk. I can't get away from this word. I'll put my thesaurus on the next time one of these two talk and see if I can get another one. But the second goal has Oxford winner vibes all over it. That ball is in the air for an absolute eternity. Go and get it, Kaminsky. Again, we need our senior players to stand up here and be counted. We are under a bit too much pressure. Go and get it. Fall to the floor. Take the speed and the hype out of the game and just start managing it for 10 or 15 minutes so that we can build our way back into the game. And we're 2-1 down. And this time I got vibes in the away end that no one thought we were coming back from that, even at 2-1.
That's what I mean. Where's that come from? Because in the last 2 months, he's been coming across, he's been improved, it's been so much better.
Was the occasion too big for them?
Well, this is what I mean. We will not get answers to this. I guarantee we will not get answers, because the regular press conferences that I go to, I will not be another one of those until the season starts. So we won't get that, and there'll be time, and they'll hope that time's a healer and stuff, but people want the answers. What is it that made that performance come about?
See, when I was making some notes during the game, and my first thing was Bell not tracking his man. Then when I watched it on the replay, I think it's actually Chris Makoso, and when you watch the game back, he drifts off and runs across the back line. Makoto goes out to his man, and then Mengi is too busy ball watching, and for some reason he tracks McGuinness's man, even though McGuinness is 3 yards in front of him, and then Bell realises too late, and then tries to get it back into cover, but it makes Bell look the one at fault for it.
Yeah, this happens right in front of the Luton fans, doesn't it? We get a bird's eye view of it, unfortunately. But either way, whatever the problems are with who's marking who, your goalkeeper's got to come 3 yards off of his goal line, jump up and catch a ball. That's all you're asking him to do.
Yeah, there's problems all over the place though. Like down the left hand side, Amari'i Bell and Mengi had, Amari'i Bell had improved. He had improved. He got back to what I thought was somewhere near his best, and then he digs out a performance of earlier in the season. And Mengi, he had that rusty first game back, seemed to be improving, but he's only come back in the last couple of games. The defence had been working so well, not with him in it. So go with that would be my thinking.
I was hoping at half time, sorry to go back to the back 4, back 5 thing, but I thought the only way
you have listened to all the podcasts, haven't you?
I thought the only way this could change would be going to a back 4, put an extra man in midfield, because they like you said, they smelt blood, they pressured us, and every time our centre midfield won it, we were 5 yards off the edge of our box. Morris is still up on the halfway line. The guy couldn't move after 10 minutes. We were pumping 30, 40-yard balls. He's not going to do anything with those balls. We needed, I think, an extra man in that midfield to try and drag us up the pitch, probably ideally Naismith.
We did, yeah. I mean, obviously at half-time at 3-1 down, Matt's gone for broke, hasn't he? But the goal that put us 3-1 down, we conceded some absolute shambles goals throughout the season, really. Yesterday in particular, but that third one, I mean, they must have popped 5 or 6 passes from the halfway line to putting fellows through, and no Luton players within 10 yards of anyone who makes that pass. That's a slight exaggeration. Let's say within 2 yards of anyone. But the pass from DK to Fellows puts him in his stride. But Mengi's tracking him. He's got the guy tracked. The guy is actually going slightly away from goal. And then for no reason, he just breaks into a jog, Mengi. And I shouldn't single out individuals, but this was so noticeable from the away end because everyone commented on it when I went down for a beer at half time. They didn't have enough beer in that in that kiosk to serve what I'd just saved up in that first half and forget it. But he just stopped. And the guy ends up with a one-on-one on the goalkeeper. He ain't missing. I've just referenced he's a decent enough player. He isn't missing. You've got to track that and throw yourself for all your worth in front of that ball because you are getting relegated at this point. And you know you are. No one's stupid. Everyone knows whether the Luton fans have told you, whether Matt Bloomfield's told you or who's told you, you all know Hull are winning the game of football at this point. You all know you're losing the game of football. You know you're getting relegated. If you have anything about you, you have to give 110% to get between him, the ball, and the goal. And I'm sorry, but too many people have referenced this, and they're right. He doesn't do that at all. It's barely 10%, let alone 110%.
Yeah, there's no aggression. Well, pretty much for the whole side. I mean, you can pick out Ali and say he's one of the bright spots, but can't talk about bright spots in this game, unfortunately. His contribution has been overshadowed by other people being too passive, and I don't know where that's come from because surely the confidence of the 10 previous games and the 21 points, 6 victories, all that should make you feel like you can go and beat anyone. And yeah, winning 4 games in any league is pretty hard, but they didn't need to win the game as it turned out. They just need to stay in it, and they could have drawn it. And maybe in the second half when, Clark pings one in and so does Ali, and even that knee that went off the post, and it could have been a game if you'd have kept in it. But to just capitulate like that is unfathomable, and I don't think people will get over it. You said at the beginning it would be one that won't live long in the memory, and I think I disagree. I think it will live very long in the memory because I've never seen, having it in your hands so much. You put yourself in the best position. You clawed and fought your way through 2 fantastic months, barring a couple of blips, to just give it up like that. I don't understand it. And there haven't been any sort of theories put forward as to why from the people that were there. I understand that, for them, they'll say it's too early and it's a bit raw and stuff. But it's not for the fans. They want to know those fans want answers. Against my better judgment, I've doom scrolled social media for far too many hours in the last 24 hours. And by and large, most people are saying the same things. Some people go over the top, but most people are saying the same things. And those things need to be addressed. And, I'm just repeating what the large majority of people are saying. They're saying that the relegation was sealed at Middlesbrough and what didn't happen afterwards, which is what we expected to. Because Edwards gave a press conference that sounded like he, had come to the end of his tenure, and everybody thought he'd be sacked, and he wasn't during that international break, and he came back. And then he had, 11 more games? I think he won 3.
10 points from those 11 games.
Yeah.
And it didn't improve. That's 2 months wasted of getting Matt Bloomfield in. I mean, there's one or two people blaming him, and you can on that game alone at the Hawthorn, you can say, I think he got maybe the selection wrong. I think maybe he got the substitutions wrong. And those are valid points, but he somehow changed that team that was absolutely dead in the water. And we thought, February time, March, that was the end of it. That they were going to be relegated, and it was a long, long trudge to the end of the season. And he changed the fortunes of that team. So I wouldn't subscribe to those people that say it was his fault, but it's earlier in the season, and they're all saying that, and they're saying, so Edwards should have gone, and the board should have made that call, and they didn't. And that's ultimately what people are saying. That is what has cost them. Now, what they don't know is why. And that's what people want to know. They want to know why. And you can't blame them.
No, you can't. I think it's pretty well known that the podcast that we did after that game didn't go down particularly well within the walls of Kenilworth Road. And unfortunately, pretty much everything we said in that podcast has come home to roost, hasn't it? And people deserve, as I said right at the start of this podcast, whether you've supported the town all 46 games this season, whether you're just a home fan or you go to all the away games, a bit of in between, or you're just able to watch from afar, you deserve the answers from people that should be managing the club to a much better level than what we've done it this season.
My friend Paul Burton, who's a diamond season ticket holder, he goes to every game. He called it Oxford away. I remember he texted me midnight, whatever time he got home, going, it's done. We're looking forward to Peterborough next year, Stevenage, Northampton, all of our old haunts back again. But for me, going back to the third goal, trying to explain to my 5-year-old daughter who was sat on the sofa next to me to go, Daddy, why did he stop running? I'd like to pull Mengi to one side and go, can you explain to my daughter, she's 5 years old and wants to know why you stopped running when she plays in the park? All she does is run. That's the basics. That's the fundamentals. It almost comes across as a lack of effort. I'm not saying for no doubt that he hasn't tried to perform throughout the season, but that's how it comes off when we're in the situation that we're in.
Absolutely. Yeah. There is no getting away from the fact that certain performances this season have been way, way, way below standard. And for it to happen yesterday, it's just criminal. It is. Ironically, they kept on flashing up at the Hawthorns that it was a criminal offence to step foot on the pitch, and one or two of an orange shirt that I was thinking similar to based on their performances yesterday. Half-time came. We needed a miracle at half-time. Of course we did. 3-1 down to West Brom. Hull are winning 1-0. And Preston are beating Bristol City at this point, and Derby and Stoke are laughing their heads off because they know full well that a draw's happy days for them. And I've not watched that game, but I'd be surprised if I ever looked at either goal, let alone shot at it. Such was the need that a draw was perfect for those two. So 2 subs at half-time. Got to say, I didn't see them because the queues for the bar were astronomical. We all needed a beer after that first half, and I just about got back in after about 90 seconds of the second half starting, but there were hundreds, maybe even thousands on that concourse that didn't come back into the second half till a long time. My sister was one of them. She finished her drink. She didn't come back in 7 or 8 minutes it was. That's how long the queues were and everything. So I missed the subs originally, but Christ Makosso went off for Reece Burke. and there was another sub as at the same time. Tahith Chong came on for someone again. I can't even remember it now. It's that sort of irrelevant. But the first thing that I thought was, one, surely we've seen Bella Mengi have been absolutely torn a new one in that first half. How is that combination staying put for the second half? I mean, there seems, I don't know if Chris Makosso is carrying an injury, but he's come off now in the last 4 games when he's not been the worst performing defender in any of those 4 games, really. So,
well, yeah, but he's come off in games where Luton are attacking and doing well and going for games, and he hasn't been needed largely in that game. He was not really at fault for the large portion of it, and it's a strange one.
Tahith Chong, he's split an opinion on away terraces. People don't think he's justified the outlay on him. But the one thing that most people have already resigned themselves to is that in a fight, he's not your man that you want to go and call for the dogs of war. And really and truly, you can see why. The first 2 things he did in the second half were pull out of 50-50 tackles, which was angering people anyway. This was a fan base that was getting angrier and angrier with every passing minute, as you would be. The situation, the lack of intensity, the lack of spirit within that side, it was just angering people. But West Brom had packed in with the right winger, hadn't they? And now it was the left back that was going to terrorise us. He scores the 4th one. Cross comes in far, far, far too easily. And he's left to tap home. And then the 5th one, we don't even look at the corner. Even look at the corner.
Warning time when they nearly hit the post from 15 minutes earlier.
Yeah,
where we're just not paying attention and picking up the edge of the box.
Grant, was it, who'd done that? I mean, but don't even look at the corner. Don't come out to him at all. It hits Asgard on its way in, doesn't he? And Asgard's 12 yards away from the bloke who hits it. I mean, come on now. Surely at this point, someone's pissed off enough to race out and throw themselves at the geezer. And if you give a yellow card and a free kick away on the edge of the box, you are getting relegated. Not only are you getting relegated, right? You're getting stuffed. Where's your personal sodding pride?
I mean, I've only seen the replays. I was in the ground. I was not paying attention to that second half whatsoever because the game was over. I was just trying to find out the other results.
Yeah, just a couple of other things to touch on the afternoon. Between goals 4 and 5, there wasn't a great deal of time. 5 minutes, if that. Lots of chanting of "you're not fit to wear the shirt" from the away end. Now, I understand that we were all angry, right? I was angry, I was embarrassed, I was ashamed, and everything else that went with it yesterday. But we are better than that as a fan base, right? Because singing that when the players are playing, there are players on there that are fit to wear the shirt. Millie Ali, as we've mentioned, Tello Asgard. I shouldn't single players out because that would mean that I'm only singling certain ones out. There are players who joined in January who are very much fit to wear the shirt. But even if you don't like those players that were playing yesterday, there's a good chance that a number of them are still going to be here wearing that shirt come August. And the last thing we need is that being their last memory. And it just doesn't help anyone. There are other ways to express anger, of which you are absolutely right and within your rights if you paid your money to go to that game yesterday to do. But a collective chant like that, we are so much better than that. We need to put that behind us, really, and focus on what can be done. And tarnishing everyone with that particular brush just doesn't feel right to me as a fan base.
No, so I don't think everyone would have reacted like that. So I watch a lot of Borussia Dortmund and AC Milan as well. But when their fans aren't happy with their players and their performance, they're ultras. They're organised though, so they have interactions where it's kind of planned, so they can put their feelings across probably more in a positive manner, so the players know how the fans feel, and also it's not, I say, that harsh initial anger of what the fans feel.
Absolutely, yeah. And then at the end of the game, look, I've called this out before, Jimbo. It is an absolute pet peeve of mine. Whatever happens, come over to the fans if you're coming over to the fans, but come over to the fans. Don't stand there on the edge of the D of the penalty box and just look on from afar. If you're going to come over, and if you're not, just f*** off up the tunnel. Because standing there and just as a token gesture, that's how it felt in that away end yesterday. bearing in mind there was an extreme amount of anger at the full-time whistle. We'd just been relegated in an embarrassing season where whatever we did this season, relegation should have been the absolute off-the-table possibility. For them to just stand there, didn't serve them any purpose, didn't serve fans any purpose. You've just been relegated. My own personal opinion is you have a divine right to go over there and apologise to the supporters who've paid good money once again to go and follow you. Carlton Morris got endless grief when he did it, but he manned up and he fronted up. Liam Walsh, the exact same thing. He walked over on his own, didn't he? Gave his boots away, gave his shirt away, and was having people singing, "You're not fit to wear the shirt" at him. Hell, if he's not fit to wear it, who is? Because he's been brilliant in the last 7 or 8 games. You have got to show more than that at the end of a game. I'm sorry. And if you're not going to, just piss off up the tunnel, because it doesn't serve a purpose to stand there and look on, because not many of them were clapping.
Yeah, it's not a good look, but I think it probably all adds into the mix of where you go next, really, and what happens next. Because as I mentioned, I've been on social media far too much, and I probably could have spared myself seeing all that, but I understand it. It's one of the worst games of football I've had to endure because of the magnitude of it. So people talking about there needs to be a rebuild, but there was always going to need to be a rebuild, regardless of whether it was success or failure yesterday, because the whole season has not been good enough, bar the last 2 months, which have been promising. And as we said, we can't go back on, and I won't go back on what I said for those last 2 months, is that you can see the blueprint of a Matt Bloomfield team, and there's players in there that should be the backbone of it. And you've mentioned some of those, and largely they're the January signings. Now, what that probably means, and what I've seen, this is what people are saying, is that all those players that have been part of back-to-back relegations, those players that are in the Premier League and those players that suffered that yesterday, it's very hard to make a case now that you can go forward with any of those. It's very hard. However much, we've talked up some of them in their Luton careers, your Burks and stuff. Now, he played quite well as an impact player and stuff, but his is a different scenario where he's just constantly injured. You can't go ahead with players that are, barely going to give you 50% of a season. But then the other players that have played constantly all the time that have not performed, that's 2 seasons of not performing, even if you give it the caveat of the Premier League. How is that? How are we going to change? It's probably a bigger job to change that mentality and that losing feeling than it is just to say, sorry, lads, that's probably the end of the road. And I understand that everybody would say all of them have to go. And maybe they're right if that's how you feel. But there's also this other scenario of that. Can they go? Can they afford to go? Is anybody going to take them? Are their contracts still live? There's such a distinct lack of understanding about the length of the contracts given that we don't know whether there's contracts up. So if they're at the end of them, would they just let them go? We don't know that. So it's not just as easy as clicking your fingers and going, all of those players can't play next season. But I understand the emotion of where it comes from. And I go back to the first game of the season, and we said this on this podcast. Afterwards, Scott Parker gave an interview to Sky after they'd smashed us 4-1 on the first day of the season. Now, bear in mind, we've come back from a relegated season, come back from a summer which wasn't particularly productive. Nobody liked it very much. We came back with loads of players still not playing, not fit, and like 2 months of, but when those players come back, we'll be okay, that sort of the thing. And I'm getting sidetracked, but afterwards, Scott Parker went on Sky and said, I went into this club in the summer when he got appointed, and we just got rid of a lot of players, essentially. I'm not giving you the direct quote. We got rid of a load of players. Now, that's going to have to happen, I think. The rebuild was always going to have to happen. I looked into it. Sheffield United, Burnley got promoted, 100 points. Sheffield United, they're in the playoffs, and that's where we thought we'd be, and that's where all the predictions were. Now, in the summer, Sheffield United got rid of 18 players, and they signed 11. Burnley got rid of 21, and they signed 10. it's very hard to make a case going into League One to stick with the players that have been responsible for 2 relegations now. I think it has to be a massive, massive rebuild job. And whether that will happen, I think there's a lot of people thinking that it won't.
I think for me, that comes down to the naivety of the club, the manager. In some aspect, hindsight, you look at Rob Edwards now, he got Forest Green promoted. Was it 10 games at Watford? And then came to us, got us promoted. He had no real experience of the higher leagues. Scott Parker was his 3rd team. He's got promoted now. Chris Wilder has been forever and a day Championship to Premier League. And I think them clubs are kind of more built. They've got more experience, of going between the Premier League and the Championship. For us, we would be like Icarus. We've gone so high so quickly, and then we have not got the infrastructure built to cope with it.
But then people, this is kind of the rock and the hard place that they're in, because people will go, we're the richest we've ever been. We're in the most sustainable, like in charge of our own off the pitch destiny that we've ever been. And it's true, but a large percentage of that money is going to the future prosperity of this club. I can't keep going over it again, because there are people that either don't understand it or they're being willfully ignorant to the opportunity that the Premier League money is given. We'd all like them to be able to spend that money on loads and loads of players and be fantastic. But that's short-termism, and the long-termism is power core. And whether you like that or not, that is necessary. But they did spend £20 million, well, from what we can make an educated guess of, because, again, we don't get the transfer fees, in the January transfer window, and they got a bunch of players who are now, well, I'm saying to you that they can go forward with those players, and they're nailed on to be the spine of the team.
Well, we've kind of covered all of these issues already on this podcast in previous episodes, Jimbo. I mean, the overriding problem that this fan base has is a lack of communication from the top. That is creating all of the problems. You can snuff out an awful lot of this anger by being communicative. Now, Jimbo, you was at the presentation evening that the Trust put on 2 weeks ago, and Gary has spoken about better communication. He did it at the Trust strategy meeting at the end of March, and he did it at the Meet the Manager night that the club put on in April. We're recording this podcast, call it 30 hours after relegation was confirmed. There hasn't been a single piece of communication, apart from a 2-minute interview with Matt Bloomfield and a 100-second interview with Carlton Morris, neither of which says anything other than, "Oh, we're sorry for the fans." That isn't communication. Now, it's a bank holiday weekend. The under-17s were playing this afternoon. That's fine. Let's cut them some slack. There needs to be communication by Friday. If we haven't got communication, having been told 3 times that we're going to get better communication, then fans are just going to grow and grow and grow with this anger. But the other thing, Jimbo, is how many times have we sat on this podcast since the end of January and pleaded with these January signings to play? Because we can all see we can't go forward with these players that you've been referencing for the last 10 minutes. Because think back to Sunderland away. It's a game that Matt references as one of the worst that he's managed at Luton. So we can reference that. You could tell that night, a blind man could tell that night, who had just arrived at our football club and who had been at our football club for a while, because the ones who just arrived, and I said it in the review of this game, the ones who just arrived immediately thought forward and tried to make something happen, and then realised that they couldn't make something happen because the rest of the team wasn't on board. The ones who had been here prior to January were in a slump that they were just not able to make anything happen from the start and went backwards with the ball whenever they got it. And that was the case again yesterday. The ones who arrived in January tried to be progressive with the football. They tried to make something happen. The ones who were here prior to January were back in that old Rob Edwards mentality of, "Oh, we're panicking, we're going backwards," and everything else. And therein lies where we go forward. Yesterday was absolutely crystal clear, the players that Matt can take forward and the players that he can't take forward. Now, you're right, there's a lot of people talking about Matt. You can't blame Matt for this. In fact, the only thing you can blame Matt for is giving us hope in the first place. Because if he hadn't given us hope, we wouldn't be as angry as what we are. It's the hope that kills you. But I saw a man hurting in front of me yesterday when he came over to the fans.
Yeah, me too.
I wasn't close enough, but he looked close to tears to me when he was clapping. And so I saw a man who was hurting, and that gave me a little bit of confidence. That took the edge off of my anger leaving the Hawthorns yesterday, that I think we've got a manager there who will be fueled by what you saw yesterday, and he'll make the changes that need to happen. Now, that also, I've spoken to him a couple of times. I won't share the conversations because I should tell him it's on the record if I'm going to come on here and say what he said to me, but he's given me the impression that he is not happy with the tools that he's got at his disposal. So I am absolutely confident that if he is backed to do it, he will have this huge turnover that we need, and he will build on these players that we're talking about, build a team around these players, because he doesn't want to play a back three. This squad has to play a back three. He doesn't want to play a back three. He signed all of those players in January. Again, we've done this, so we apologise for repeating ourselves. He signed those players in January to play a back four and a front three, and we're going to go and do that by hook or by crook, and I'm certain that we'll do that. So that gives me, not solace because it's too soon for that, but that down the road, the light is at the end of the tunnel, that he will be fueled to transform this. But he needs better backing than what Rob got last summer, that's for sure.
He won't want a relegation on his CV, so I think he's the type of character that will want to prove himself again and prove that it was the right decision to leave Wycombe to join us. So I think he strikes me as the type of character that, will really fight against that to prove that he's the right man for the job.
Listen, I'm a sucker for the evidence. The evidence of the last 2 months, barring that horrible game at the Hawthorns that we just had to witness, if you can't see the change that he has affected with these players that have underperformed for so long beforehand and then at the Hawthorns, then I don't know what to say to you. I can't, there's no change in your mind. You'll be set in your way and saying he's not the man to take you forward. If he's done that with that squad and given us hope, like you said, then he'll be able to do it, given a full summer, but he has to be given the backing. Now, all of that still comes back to the communication point that you were talking about. We need to know if he will be. And there's lots of steps into this. Now, you mentioned that nothing has been said after the game. I'd try and temper people's feelings on that. I'd say probably need to give it a week, probably. And I say this for this reason, because the Plymouth Argyle CEO has come out and put out a statement the day after. But Plymouth knew they were relegated last week, and they probably got a sense of it, despite their uptick, that they were gone anyway before that. So they've had a chance to put that right. Now, I know that they're going to be meetings all week with the players in Bloomfield, and there's going to be the planning starts now. So give them a week, and there probably needs to be some communication. But that being said, I'm not sure, from what I've seen from people and what I've heard from people and what people have told me, that a simple statement in a week's time is going to be enough. Because there's been statements in programme notes. That's really been the communication avenue so far this season. And it unfortunately, it doesn't read the room of what people are wanting. They are wanting the answers to the big questions of what has gone wrong. And what a statement does means you can, this is for all statements, football, politics, anything. That's you controlling the narrative. And that's your version of it with no sort of comeback on it. And we're living in a question and answer age now, where people get that instant interaction with people. They want to know that. So you could put out a statement, unless it nails everything that everybody wants to know. I don't think that's going to be enough. So there needs to be something else. And then it can't, I don't think a sort of a club video would be enough for people. It's just what I'm seeing and reading from people and hearing from people. I don't think a club video would be enough. It's essentially just a visual example of the statement. It needs to be some sort of forum where the tough questions are put forward and you get the answers that you want. Now, you might not get the answers you want, but you can put the questions forward. And certainly there have been some of those questions put forward, like the meet the manager evening, particularly in relating to that Middlesbrough game and whether they should have got rid of Rob. You were there. What was the answer?
told to keep it from within, but and not bring it out, and I'll keep that. But you're right. What that answer that was given should be in the public domain now, because there was 70 or 80 people at that Meet the Manager night, which ultimately did turn into a Meet Gary night, and Matt answered a few questions in and around it. But yeah, that is the thing. I mean, listen, Gary's been invited on this podcast on a number of occasions. That invitation is still open. He can sit here if he wants to and answer questions from you and I, and questions that we'll invite from our listeners that would be well worthy. It's up to him if he wants to come on. We both have full-time jobs. We're not going to ring him up every single night and chase him. He knows that the invitation's there if he wants to come on. That would be one way of doing it. But however it is that it's done, the communication methods need to be better to all, particularly the ones who they are relying on paying their money in the next 3 months to go and watch League One football. A lot of people are going to have to be convinced, Jimbo. People are expecting prices to be reduced. I'm not so sure they're going to be. I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not convinced they're going to be.
That's the thing. I'm essentially in the question and answer business as well, and I'd like to ask those questions and have that forum, but it's not really about me and whether I get to ask those questions. It's about whether those questions just get to be asked.
That's the thing.
And silence, I don't think, is going to cut it. And I'm only saying this because I think the strength of the feeling is it's gone so the other way. It's gone so bad that, that it's their own reputation, which had been fantastic. And it's almost like I don't want to see that tarnished, but it is being, and silence isn't the way to go forward anymore. And it's in a sort of situation where they need to come out and say something about it. But there are so many questions that people have. There are so many things that have gone wrong. Whether they can do that. Now, obviously, the case in point at the moment is that there's one tweet or one post that's gone out on social media where people are just downright furious that they even refuse to mention the word relegation in the post. And it's that sort of things, and these things are spiraling, and they'll continue to spiral in a vacuum of silence while that goes on. Now, at the same time, I'm saying you probably should give them a week to get their ducks in a row. But then there probably needs to be something more than like a statement. Like if you go back to the Plymouth one, for instance. Now, I've read the statement. I don't know Plymouth and their ins and outs and what's gone wrong in their club whatsoever, so it doesn't really mean much to me. But from an outside point of view, my view would be that Wayne Rooney put them in that position by his management. And the question I would probably want to ask the Plymouth people in charge is, why did you hire Wayne Rooney when all the evidence showed he couldn't do a good job, when he took a very high-flying Birmingham side and essentially got them relegated? Why did you do that? And then why did you probably take too long to get rid of him? But there's nothing in that statement. And that's what I mean about statements are this. And I would say this because I'm a journalist, but statements are, there's a very famous George Orwell quote, isn't there? If you don't know, George Orwell wrote one of the most important books of all time, 1984. He said that journalism is printing what someone else does not want printed, and everything else is public relations. And that's, whatever you want to say about the profession of journalism, that is what they should be doing and asking those tough questions. Otherwise, you'll get statements and you'll get videos that don't really ask the things that people want to hear. And I think we're sort of in that position really, where it needs to be a little bit more than statements and tweets.
I think a week, if it's a statement that gives us probably majority of the answers, I don't think we're going to get all the answers. If we get most of the answers, most of the fan base, I think, would be happy. But I know the fans I work with and interact with, the biggest thing is when we're riding that crest of the wave, especially in the Premier League, you couldn't turn on Sky Sports or the BBC without Gary Sweet being there. And then since the end of the Premier League season, people have been wanted posters for him because he's gone missing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll caveat that. Look, do I think Gary Sweet should come here and answer the questions? Yes, I absolutely do. This isn't about Jimbo and this, or myself, or indeed this podcast. Jimbo and I sit here on a weekly basis for you guys because we have the ability to offer up our views for you guys and get the insights that Jimbo can get us through the press conferences and everything that you can't normally get. Was Gary everywhere during the Premier League season? Absolutely he was. But people wanted him. Media wanted him during the Premier League season. Did the media want a failing Championship CEO? No, they don't. They want the people in the Premier League, and that's the case. However, he does have club platforms that he can sit on. He sat and done a 5-minute interview before he sat in front of you guys when he appointed Matt Bloomfield. And I remember at the time there was an awful lot of positivity around that video that was posted. It was only 5 minutes explaining what they saw in Matt and everything else. But people were saying, it's good to hear from Gary. We'd love to hear more from Gary. Now, everyone accepts that Gary's a busy man. He's trying to run a football club and a development down at Power Court. And this relegation has even taken the shine off of the great news that we had from Power Court last week, hasn't it? And there's people out there who think he should delegate and do one and not the other and put someone else in charge for the other. He clarified that at the Meet the Manager night, why he hasn't got a director of football. And again, I was asked not to say it, but people who were there have got that answer. Again, more of you should have that answer. It's only right that the people who are paying the people to run the club should get more answers than what they're getting. We can't do anything about that unless Gary comes and sits here. But the fact of the matter is that perception that Tom's just spoken about is glittered within our fan base. It's not just the people that Tom knows. I hear it all of the time from you guys at away games, at home games, and via communications that you have with me through the trust. The simple fact is we were built on transparency, the goodwill between fans and 2020, and there should still be plenty of that. Don't forget that. We don't want to be in a Reading situation. We don't want to be in a Sheffield Wednesday situation. We should thank our lucky stars that we're not in that situation. But that doesn't mean to say that when mistakes have happened that those mistakes shouldn't be accounted for, because if they're not accounted for, the fears within the fan base, and you've referenced it a couple of times on this podcast, and I hear it every single game. The fear is that if the mistakes aren't accounted for, they'll be allowed to happen again. And if they're allowed to happen again, we're going to have another season like this. I think Tom mentioned it earlier, we have to come out of League One at the first opportunity, because once you get ensconced at a level, it's a bugger to get out of.
This relegation has thrown up so many problems. There's the rebuild that we talked about. There's the communication that we have to talk about. And primarily I'm saying this because it is overshadowing currently all the good. The Power Court stuff was fantastic. And I can't help you if you're not on board with it, really. And it's overshadowed that. So there's that. But then it pumps so much pressure on next season, because nothing short of an automatic promotion push is going to be good enough. It just simply isn't. There's 3 other teams that have gone back-to-back relegations out of the Premier League. And the only one that didn't come straight back up as champions is Sunderland, because they were an absolute basket case off the pitch. Now, Luton are not. Regardless of all these questions and answers we've been talking about, they're not. They were talked of as one of the best run clubs in the country when they got to the Premier League. The Power Court stuff showed you that they're thinking about not only just the club, but the town of Luton as long-term a prospect of keeping it sustainable and regenerating the town. You'd show me another, club owner that has done that, really, apart from the massive billionaire ones of Chelsea and Man City. And then you're talking an oil state and, a Russian billionaire. These are just ordinary fans that put those things first. But all of this is getting overshadowed by the stuff that people are angry about. And if they don't go into next season, having got their business done really quickly in the summer, got a bunch of new players in, got pretty much a lot of the old guard out, because the evidence has showed you can't really go forward with them, regardless of whether they love the club or whether there's any sentimentality in there. This has to be ruthless summer.
Well, I kind of think we've already seen evidence of that, haven't we? Victor Moses is nowhere to be seen now since Matt saw him in that first game and didn't like what he saw. Rue Walters hasn't been seen since Sunderland, since Matt saw him and didn't like what he saw. Hashioka's not been seen, exactly. Mads Anderson has only been on the bench since the Watford game. Well, I think we've got a man who is ruthless enough to say, look, you are not a Matt Bloomfield player. You are not part of my plans. Then it's for the club to get rid of them. It's not for Matt Bloomfield to get rid of them. Matt Bloomfield has got to go and make sure he's got 25 players that can play his system in the way that he wants to play his football next season.
That want to be here.
That are going to give 110%, like Millie Ali has done, and the other ones that came in January. Obviously, I know people are screaming at me right now. What about Nordas? Give him a break. Let's give him a pre-season and let's see what he's got. Everyone else has convinced us from January. We've got the manager who is going to do that. It's for the club then to sort out the rest of it, isn't it? If Matt says to the club, look, here's 15 players that I just cannot go on with, it's for the club then to either find them a club. They're going to have to take a loss on them. It's just, we've gone down 2 divisions since you brought half of them. You're not going to get your money back. You've got to accept that. And if you can't get rid of them, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to dip your hand in your pocket with the parachute money that we're still getting and pay them off. Because Matt needs 25 players, and he knows what he needs. He got Wickham into second place. If he can get Wickham into second place in League One, he can sure as buggery get Luton into second place. He needs this summer, from the minute that the transfer window opens early in June, he needs to be able to go out and get the players to fit in around the Fannies, the Asgards, the Allies, the Joneses, the Macossos, the McGuinnesses of this world. And that when we hit pre-season, which is another thing that has to be 1,000,000 times better than that shambles that we put out last season in pre-season, that we're ready to hit the ground running so that come August the 3rd, this football team is ready to play football on August the 3rd, not October the 3rd like it started playing for the last 4 or 5 seasons.
I think this is probably one of our biggest transfer windows we need, probably within the last decade, I think. And some of that stems back to the Premier League season, that January. I think we had too much sentiment for players. Dan Potts, for example, he's nowhere near fit enough. I think he only made the bench twice. Why were we registering him in January? We should be shipped out. We had the Premier League money, pay him off and get someone else in to fill the squad. And then we may not have had the injury crisis. I think we've had, for me, we come across as nice little old Luton with 2 nice players that got us there, but no good if they're injured all the time. Can't play.
Yeah, my point is that all of those things need to happen, but even if they do, there's no guarantee of success. Now, I think that they've got a good chance because of what Matt Bloomfield has done in 2 months. But if it doesn't happen, this is the problem they've got. If it doesn't happen, you're back in the conference season where you're going to you've gone to the heights where you've mixed it with Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, and then you're going to have to go to Mansfield, Rotherham and stuff like that. And if it ain't right and if things aren't going, it has a very, very high chance, I think, of turning quite toxic. And this is everything that I didn't want to happen. I mentioned on this podcast at the start of this season, I was worried that things could turn toxic. And that is it. That is the problem that they've got now because of the situation that they've overseen in this last season. And so all those answers are necessary. You keep going back to them to find out what went wrong so you don't repeat those again. But it's still football, and that Luton are going to be a massive scalp in that division because they've just come from the Premier League. There's some teams in there that are backed. Wickham, if they don't go up, they've got a billionaire backing them. So it's not just going to be a walk in the park just to get up. But you go back to the 3 other teams that have gone down twice, they've gone back up as champions. So if Luton aren't at least automatic promotion contenders all the way through and showing it, I think there could be problems.
I think there's a old Japanese proverb that translates to, if you learn from it, it's not a mistake. So we need to make sure we learn from it and quick. But I want to know, are we going to be in the same situation we were this summer, complaining that agents were wanting too much money because we've got the money? We're a big club in League One with all this Premier League money. Our agents going to want the same? Players going to want more money? Because we've come down from the Premier League, Championship. It's another issue we'd have to deal with.
I kind of think that is irrelevant now. That can't be an argument. They've got to accept there's going to be losses here to try and get back where you need to be, because otherwise, the other example of this team that didn't go up was Sunderland. They spent 4 very painful seasons for them in the 3rd tier. Now they're a massive club with a 40,000 seat stadium. It only needed somebody to come in and fix that and stop doing documentaries on Netflix and do it properly. And you see where they are now. They're back where they should be, challenging for promotion to the top flight. Well, Luton aren't going to be in that position for another 3 or 4 years until Power Court comes along. So it's a massive ask.
In hindsight, I kind of not like the fact, that we went down to the conference, but I think it was a good reset to clear the club out, reset. Not that I want to spend 5 years going to Hinckley and Tamworth away and then dark, dark days, but I like to think that if we can use this as a reset to get the old guard out, new, younger, hungrier players in, we can build from there.
But go back to your Japanese proverb, if you learn from it, it's not a mistake. Now, everybody, and I think I was guilty of it as well, when we went to the Championship, we went, we'll piss that league and we're back no trouble. And it wasn't that. And because they were a big scalp and everybody wanted to beat Luton.
When we went to the conference, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, but we had all sorts of shit going on off the pitch,
Yes.
which we haven't got. This club is in the best state it's ever been off the pitch.
But that is also why this makes this the worst relegation. Now, listen, next season will be the 20th year since I first started writing about Luton. And I've experienced 5 relegations. 3 of them are in a row, from the Championship to the Conference. And all of that was because of off-the-field terrible owners that absolutely nearly put this club to the wall. And what it gave Luton fans was a siege mentality that you could all rally and go, well, we know why that's happened. We don't like it. The FA shouldn't have done what they did to us and really tried to put us out of existence, but we're going to band it together and get back on it. It still got to the toxic point where it needed John Steele to come in and sort out in the conference. But you understood why that happened. This one, this relegation is the most avoidable relegation that you will ever likely to see. And so every single step from here on now has to be virtually perfect.
Yeah, for the want of repeating myself, it comes down to communication. Listen, forget that it will turn toxic. It's turned toxic, right? It has turned toxic. It turned toxic yesterday. It was the most toxic away end. Having been in the best away end I've ever been in at Derby, it was the most toxic away end I've been in. More toxic than the conference days, because we're attracting more supporters now. 2,500 went there yesterday. You could have had another 2,500, no sweat, if we'd been given 5,000 tickets. There weren't many conference away ends that had 2,500 in it, 250 if you were lucky at times. It has turned toxic, and the only way it's going to unturn toxic in the immediacy is some communication about what has gone wrong this season. People won't like what they're told, because ultimately we failed, and people don't like being told about failure. But if they can start to understand why we failed this season, and there cannot be any other word that's used. And now club staff repeatedly mention that I spread negativity, which is bullshit. I don't. I say what I see, which is in front of me. And ultimately, I've seen a team that has lost 23 games of football out of 46 in the Championship, having just come down from the division above. It's not negativity. That's realism. The last 6 or 7 games, I'd like to think I've spread nothing but positivity. Even after the Blackburn game, I wasn't sat here killing the world. I was ready to go again for the Derby game. So rather than worry about what we say on this podcast, get the message out to the people who want to hear what has gone wrong and why. You're right. There are 3 real big things, real big issues that need to be clarified in order for the fan base to settle down a little bit. Why wasn't more spent in the summer, being one? Why did you keep Rod Edwards, being the second one? And what happened yesterday, being the third one, right? So let's do that. Let's do that. The summer was a mess. We had injured players in the summer. No loans were brought in to account for that. Preseason was an absolute shambles, right?
I can't remember one worse.
Absolute shambles. I called it out after the Middlesbrough game at the time. For some reason, this football club goes off to Slovenia and doesn't start playing proper football until October. If that's negativity, then so be it. But that is also the situation, right? the Great Escape season with all of the caveats that we just got promoted to the Championship and we lost our two best players and everything else, we didn't get playing for ages. The first season that we made the playoffs under Nathan Jones, we didn't get going for ages and we flew home. We were nowhere under Nathan Jones when he left before Rob picked up the pieces and got us promoted. We didn't get going in the Premier League until October, November, and we didn't get going this season until March. Let's be honest about it. Preseason has to be a lot better. We are not fit. This football team has not been fit for 2 years. It needs to be put through a rigorous preseason. If that's in Slovenia, that is absolutely fine. But it needs to come back from Slovenia ready to go a hell of a lot quicker than what it does. Now, I've heard references that John Still says you're better off playing your best football at the end of a season than the start. And that's absolutely right. But that doesn't mean to say that the start of the season needs to be as pathetic as what this one was. Because you're just playing catch up. And like you've said, the further down the table we are next season, the less shrift that's going to be held in amongst people. We have to hit the ground running from the 3rd of August and go again. We have to play pre-season friendlies in front of fans, none of this behind closed doors cobblers, in front of fans that are actually going to be meaningful to us. What did we gain out of playing Dundee United last season? They're absolutely terrible with it. They're 3rd in their league now, but it's a terrible league. What did we gain from playing a bunch of Turkish teams out in Slovenia behind closed doors? Chong got a headache when he got barged into the steps. That's all we got. And Celta Vigo, we got given a runaround by a team who were still 3 weeks away from starting their season. There was no benefits to any of that in pre-season. Let's get back to playing these teams who want to kick and fight amongst us. Your Barnets and your Boreham Woods and your Stevenage, well, not Stevenage, going to be in the same division as us next season, your Cambridges of this world, because do you know what? Come the first league game, they're going to be getting kicked all over the place by whoever it is that we're playing in that first game. Let's not go up against a bunch of sides who are way behind us preparation-wise because their season doesn't start for another month. Let's get serious with this pre-season because we have to hit the ground running in August. We can't afford to give ground to these teams that we keep on doing because staying in League One for this fan base, having enjoyed the Premier League and 4 years of the Championship 5 years of the Championship either side of it, is not acceptable anymore, nor should it be acceptable with the financial situation of the football club and the perfectly good state that the football club is in. So that's the first thing. Why wasn't Rob sacked after Middlesbrough? Well, we've been told because they like to be loyal to their managers, and that's fine. No one out there wants us to be that lot down the road, right? No one wants the first sign of the going getting tough for the manager to get the boot, and we get into this situation where they get to now. I mean, how cleverly he's not manager of the season, having kept that job for a year, I've absolutely no idea. But we don't want to get into that situation, but you have to recognise a hell of a lot quicker that was going Pete Tong, particularly when the manager came over to the fans and waved goodbye and in all the press conferences of the same game basically put himself up for the sack. Had they sacked him then, no one would have said anything. We said in the podcast earlier, 11 games longer, 10 points. We went down on goal difference, a point a game in those 11 games. And I remember referencing it at the time that we had a run of something like 13 games without any team in the top 6. So it wasn't like it was a difficult run in those 11 games. One more point in those 11 games and we would still be in the Championship right now. I'm sorry, but whether you like the fact that people are questioning you or not, but they're entitled to those answers, aren't they? And
that is the crux of it. That is, I mentioned the amount of time I've just seen endless comment after comment after comment that the relegation was effectively confirmed by that Middlesbrough game, and then what didn't happen, what everybody expected to happen for the 2 weeks afterwards. That is where it is, and that it has to be addressed because that's the amount of people that are talking about it, and we don't know why. Other than that reason, which is an admirable reason, I like pretty much most of the stances this club takes about people and the living wage and all these great things that they've done, and it's getting overshadowed by it. And to let it carry on and not address it it's not the way to go, I don't think.
And even in hindsight, if you now think that you got it wrong, just come out and say, look, we got it wrong. people get things wrong. It's absolutely fine to get things wrong,
Part
isn't
of
it?
life.
Yeah. Christ, the amount of times I have to record this intro before we put it out to you guys, you know, Jimbo will know if we put the bloopers out of this podcast, well, we might have to because it's been so depressing so far in this, but there's loads of them. But we admit it. I messed up on the social media of the Trust Awards night. I announced Jordan Clark as an award winner, but the camera roll didn't move on to Jordan Clark, and I put an image up of Christ Makosso, and everything was going rat-a-tat-a-tat-a-tat, that I didn't get a chance to rectify it. And then obviously, you know, you get all of the nitwits messaging, Jordan Clark's got a suntan, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of it, I said, yeah, well done to everyone who noticed that I put the wrong image up. But I owned it. It's fine to own your mistakes, but do own your mistakes, because if you don't own your mistakes, then people will keep on bashing you about these mistakes until they're blue in the face.
But this is the thing, isn't it? Because it was said, I don't know whose programme Colin was. I think it might have been Gary's. I don't want to put words in people's mouth or words on paper that wasn't attributed to him. I think it was a Gary programme piece where he said mistakes have been made by him, by some other people.
But didn't elaborate on it.
That's step one. But I don't think that's the final step. And there needs to be more. People need more. Like, I spoke to Carlton Morris yesterday, and he said, yeah, there's sort of 6 or 7 reasons as to why it's all gone wrong, but I won't go into them. Don't say that, because they're annoyed by that statement.
And I want to know what the 6 or 7.
What are those 6 or 7?
If you're not going to say it, keep stum, basically,
Exactly.
isn't it? You know, that's the way of the world. And yeah, look, we've still got a fantastic board of directors, right? I think most sane Luton fans out there are right behind 2020. They're annoyed at 2020 for allowing this season to happen. This season should never have been allowed to happen in the manner that it has done. Maybe all along they thought we're too good to go down. Maybe they thought that, and that's fine to think that. Obviously, if it comes back to bite you on the arse, again, you've got to own it, and it's that simple, because it is fine to make mistakes, and I come back to the fact that this football club is healthy, right? This football club is one of the healthiest football clubs going around. You look at the club accounts that were published, the cash in the bank is fine, you know. Whether it can remain as sustainable as they want to in League One, well, that's for them to work out themselves, isn't it? And kind of get us through that. But we've got a stadium on the horizon. We've got an academy that's winning trophies. Every time I load up social media, they're winning another trophy through one of the teams. The future of this football club is bright. But unfortunately for next season, it's in League One, and it was just so avoidable. And just come out and put your hands up. And we got it wrong. People initially probably won't like it, but do you know what? When we get ready for pre-season and everyone's getting together again, hopefully we can go to a friendly and everyone's getting together and talking about it, and they'll probably be like, well, at least they've been accountable for it, which they can't say right now.
I mean, the Meet the Manager night, the Supporters Trust Awards night, Bloomfield and Gary both on stage, they talked to who was there, and I appreciate that. You don't want to say what they said if you weren't there, but what they said was really engaging. I could see by looking at faces and what they were saying, they were on board with what they were saying. It wasn't just sort of endless cliches and platitudes. It was interesting stuff. All that needs to happen is just to take what they were saying there, put it out into a public forum, because I think that words on paper are words on paper. Everybody's emailed people from work, and you've got a shitty email from Brenda from accounts, but then you go and speak to Brenda from accounts. She's actually sound. She just put it terribly down on a bit of paper. That can happen. You get a completely different reaction to people when you're there face to face talking to them, or they're talking to you, and you hear the reasoning, you hear the tone in the voice, you hear everything, but you don't get on the printed word sometimes.
A bit like someone calling you twats.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Absolutely case in point, isn't it?
I did do it for a bit of a pun, to be honest. I'm not going to lie.
And I'm glad you're not upset by that. But that is the case in point, or one example of it. You know, I get to speak to Bloomfield a lot, and it's often really quite interesting stuff. It doesn't always make the stories, because sometimes it's better in a conversation or better on a video, better, would be good on a podcast. There's all these different ways that these mediums come out, but he's quite an engaging fella and he's a positive guy. And actually, when on the rare occasion I get to speak to Gary Sweet, he is to that. That's not a sentence, is it? He is that too. He's quite erudite. He comes across quite well. Doesn't do enough.
I think that's something that goes back from one of the previous podcasts where you've said when there's silence, people will make their own answers.
Yeah. They fill the vacuum with conjecture and rumor and conspiracy theory, and all this stuff doesn't help. In this day and age, you can't afford to be like the royal family of, never explain, never complain. You can't do that.
Especially as negativity seems to spread 100 times faster than positivity.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely it does. And that is the trouble, that all the positive stuff is hard fought and takes a long time to build up, and then suddenly negative stuff crashes it to the ground so quickly. It's very hard to get on top of. And I don't think it's really a case that you could say, oh, it's just people on social media and stuff, because everybody is now on social media. Not everybody says stuff, but they see it. And you can't help it influencing. You just have to look at the political climate in this country, in America, of how it does influence people.
Yeah, listen, we live in a digital world, don't we? And, communication has to be digital. Is why we're now on this video. We only used to offer audio, didn't we? But people want to watch these things as well as listen to them, and so, you have to provide what people want, and people want the answers, and they need to be provided. They need to be provided with it. Listen, the anger in the fan base will settle down. We'll all be there, whether we like it or not. We'll all be there come League One next season, because we've all been there before, and we'll be there again. And let's hope we're only there for one season. But it would just make things a whole lot easier for everyone if people get some of the answers. That you're not going to get all the answers that you're looking for. You're just not. There'll be some confidential stuff between them and Rob of why it all went pear-shaped towards the end, and that will never come out, and I wouldn't want it to come out, really, because well,
listen, some of that is personal stuff, and you can make an educated guess as what it is. Some of the rumours are complete nonsense, but you can say that probably the Tom Lockyer stuff really had an effect. Trauma has a funny way of not getting you at the time, maybe because it's all adrenaline, you're dealing with a situation. You can say that probably had an effect. I think that's a good educated guess to make. But he's not a club employee anymore. He gave us one of the best days ever of our Luton watching life. Sometimes it's like don't dig up those old things, so you can understand why. But it probably needs to be a better explanation as to why everybody, including probably him, thought that might be the end at Middlesbrough, and it wasn't. And then why it carried on for 11 pretty uninspiring games until the one game where he did start changing it at QPR, and then that proved to be his last one. So there is that. But, there's other things that people are mentioning again. I'm just relaying to you out there what people have been saying on social media. I've looked through loads of it, so perhaps you don't have to. But they're talking about it's absolutely essential that Luton gets a director of football. That's not going to happen. Unless I'm greatly surprised, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, it's not. That that was confirmed. They don't believe in the director of football model, and that's fine. But
I don't think we might not get the answers until someone does a documentary or autobiography in 20 years' time of what actually happened.
Yeah, that's it. But that's not what we can't have that. We need to have an understanding of what happened this season so that we know the red flags to look for next season. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, as a fan base, we should have red flags ready, shouldn't we? Because for all the 20...
if you go on social media, I am inundated with people telling me about red flags, this and that. I've never heard this phrase until a couple of years ago, and now it's like, red flag this. I went on a date, red flag this. Honestly, if it's not in the public vernacular now and in your psyche now, then it never will be. But that is again, it's sort of a gauge of how people think and how people interpret information, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed, because we have heard publicly 2020 saying they want to be asked the tough questions. Well, if you want to be asked the tough questions, then we need to know the things that we need to look out for, because they're brilliant owners, 2020. They've had a terrible 18 months in the eyes of the fan base, terrible 12 months in the eyes of me. I'll cut them the Premier League slack. That was new to everyone. I wouldn't expect them to have got that perfect as much as I would have loved them to. That's an expectation beyond our control. But
it's actually been borne out, really, because Ipswich spent £150 million and they have not even got the points that they've gone down 4 games before the end of the season.
As did Burnley, didn't they? So it had been borne out before that. Look, mistakes happen. Let's own up. Let's move on. Let's just give us indication so we know that it doesn't happen again. Look, we all know that pre-season has to be better. We all know that summer transfer window has to be an awful lot better. You know, there's just 2 things, and then we can kind of go from there. There's encouragement that Matt brought in the right players in January. Yes, we all know he should have been in early on in January so that he could have had the whole month to himself to deal with transfers, and who knows, maybe we'd have got another point out of it. But ultimately, we are where we are, aren't we? And whether we get the answers or whether we don't get the answers, this football club has to move forward, and this football club has to move forward in League One, and we've just got to be ready for it. We've got to be ready for it in the terraces. We've got to be ready for it in the boardroom. And most of all, we've got to be ready for it in the dugout and on the football pitch, because, you know, it's a 46-game slog. You think the Championship's a slog. It's even more of a slog in that. There's more midweek games. There's more cup games. There's, you know, what you play through the international breaks. It's literally relentless in League One.
Papa John's Trophy.
Is that what they do? Whatever they call it.
So.
Yeah, call it some stupid thing, don't they?
That one, I mean, when you think about it, I don't think anybody's excited about League One football, but the fact you have to go and be in that trophy again, I think just play the kids and give them some experience in that, because nobody wants that.
You only care about it until you get to the semi-final. And
Exactly that.
Jimbo's all about the glory. He is. But that's where we're at. We've been relegated. We're going to be starting the next season in League One. Let's hope we can, from this day onwards, let's hope we can build towards hitting the ground running in League One. A little bit of acceptance of what's gone on, a little bit of seeing with our eyes that summer transfers are happening straight away, and that they're Luton transfers. You know, I think if the first player who walks through the door is an injury pro player again, people will pull their hair out. It's just how the legacy of the last 18 months has left people. That if the first player who walks through the door is an injury prone free transfer, people need a little bit of something to get behind. The next transfer needs to be the second Millie Ali rather than the second Shandon Baptiste.
Well, I can give you a little bit of insight there. I won't tell you who told me, but the plan is not to do that anymore. I mean, it has to be, actions have to meet the words, but the plan is not to do that instead, because there's been too many players that haven't played enough games, and they can't go into a grueling. It's going to be more than what, 40, if you had the trophy games as well, it's going to be like 55 games if you do well in it. That you can't have players that aren't going to be around, and so sentimentality has to go out the window, and that may even, it may even come down to, Tom Lockyer, which will be incredibly harsh, but
football's a harsh business.
Exactly, particularly because James Shea got a contract when he was injured and stuff, but the climate and the thinking around it now from the fan base I'm getting is that has changed now, and so I'd love nothing more than to see Tom Lockyer in a Luton shirt again. But if they don't think that they can go forward with it, then you have
the word that sort of previews the next 3 months is ruthless, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need to be ruthless now. We weren't 12 months ago. You mentioned it earlier in the podcast, and you're absolutely right. We weren't ruthless. We were too loyal to people that we shouldn't have been too loyal to. Not talking necessarily the manager, but talking about players who were injury prone, who literally could not get us where we wanted to go, bearing in mind what we were told at the start of last year. Please don't come out with any of that nonsense this time, because that really will just anger people if you start talking about free-flowing, attacking, automatic promotion football. Deliver that? Don't promise it. And that's what we need to be, isn't it? We need to be ruthless. I'm confident Matt will be ruthless. He has been in the 4 months he's been in charge. We've mentioned 4 players who we haven't seen after really, really, really poor performances. He seems to be the kind of guy who ain't going to take no bad performances. He speaks so much about performance as well, doesn't he? So you can see why that's the case.
They have to be ruthless, but they have to sign ruthless, because the situations in both boxes are simply not good enough to go down on goal differences, because you shipped so many goals in, until we've got to the Hawthorns, but up until March was ridiculous amount of goals, like the second highest amount of goals conceded in the league, and then the lowest scorers. You can't. I mean, Eli's not going to play next season by all accounts, or he might make the last month or so because of his injury. But Adebayo and Morris, for all some of the good work they've done when they've not scored, when you look at the pure stats of it, 1 goal between them in 2025 is not good enough. And so you have to go out and find a striker that's going to score you the goals, but you have to find some defenders, clearly, that are going to throw their bodies on the line and stop them as well. Ruthless.
That's the word. Yep, we need to be ruthless. I think being in League One will help it from a transfer point of view, because Luton are more likely to sign Luton players in League One, because we'll be shopping in the markets that Luton are more experienced in shopping in. Obviously in the Premier League, you're shopping in markets that you either need to spend way too much money to attract, or players who simply aren't going to be good enough for the Premier League. And that's where we've been found out. We know what to attract in League One. We know the players that get you out of League One. We've now got to go and sign them.
I think the other thing, it will allow, I say maybe less pressure, but we can bring some of the youth players through as well.
Absolutely that. Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Luton get behind their own. We've got a couple of voids that are obvious, left back being one. You've got Joe Johnson. You've got Benny, who scored the 3rd goal for the youth team at Swansea on Sunday. You've got Zach Nelson.
Lynch, who they've recalled.
Zach Nelson, who's obviously been in the fringes of it. Josh Phillips played at Bristol City this season as well. You've got a thriving youth. Taylor Harris was on the bench at wherever he was on the bench. Derby, was it that he was on the bench? You have got a thriving youth system that you can use for the trophy, for the, parts of the squad that need it. And if we can get a decent pre-season program, and that could do with being announced fairly early as well, so that fans know what's happening where and get behind it, then there is no reason why this club can't turn it around quickly. Look, it's not going to be an easy fix. No one sat here thinks it's going to be an easy fix, but it is fixable. It just needs to be strong, determined, and ruthless. And we'll turn this corner. Listen, we've been in far worse situations than this as a football club. You and I, Tom, have been standing on terraces far, far lower down than what we're doing next season. There's just an embarrassment to this relegation that we all need to take time, park it. When we come back, for whether you go to a pre-season friendly or it's August the 2nd or 3rd when we play our first game of the season, just be ready to get right behind this football club again, because the only way out of League One, it ain't sporadic and toxic fan bases. The only way out of League One is together. And hopefully that togetherness is built between now and that first game of the season, so that we have something to get behind, so that we can really flow and get ourselves back in to a position where I think Luton fans are acceptance of where we are right now.
I think the other thing in football, we have very short memories. If we start the start of next season, 3 or 4 wins out of 5, and we're automatically near the top of the table, we'll forget about West Brom away, and we'll be focusing on the current job in hand.
Absolutely right. Yep. We've won League One before. Ironically, 6 years ago to this very day that we're recording this podcast, we won League One. Unfortunately, in 3 months' time, we're right back in there. Long podcast this time. We wasn't going to do as much of a season debrief as we thought we were going to, actually, but Jimbo's off on one, and I don't like to stop him when he's off on one. So we've debriefed much of the season. I will still try and get some reaction from within and have someone on the podcast so that we can get some official answers, if at all possible. Bear with us on that one. Obviously, I'm going to let the dust settle a little bit. I wouldn't want emotion to still be involved when that comes along, because it just doesn't serve any purpose to get all emotional with this. We want to be down the line and structured so that we get the answers that we want, really.
Well, kind of. I mean, you will get outbursts of people that can't quite control emotions, but other than the fact that we were given some hope we at various points in the season thought we were down. So it's only really the disastrous last day that has people furious, really. I mean, the writing was on the wall, if you listen to most people, quite some time ago, November, probably. So it's the performance that people can have trouble with, really, because where that came from and why it came about is something that probably won't be able to get a clue on.
I did have a meme sent to me of the Scooby-Doo, when they pull the mask off, and under Matt Bloomfield it was Rob Edwards, and said he's been taking training this week.
That's what else you said, isn't it? About it looked like a Rob Edwards defence, and it's I can't. I'm looking forward to just not thinking about it for a little while, to be honest.
Indeed. So, yeah, I can't believe there wasn't a correct score in amongst the predictions, but there wasn't a correct score in amongst them.
I'm sure I said 5-3 West Brom.
I can guarantee you didn't, my friend. No, you didn't get it right, which means that Claire Clark is our winner of the season-long prediction competition. Well done, Claire. I'll be in touch.
Congratulations.
I'll be in touch with you about a prize as soon as I can get something sorted, and we'll do it all again next season, Jimbo.
Where's my prize?
What did your prize is merely being able to gloat.
I did win the head-to-head prediction league, so where's my goddamn prize? I mean, this is cheering me up, actually. This when I want you to know, I want you to be on this camera here and tell me what's my prize.
Your prize is you can spend 46 review podcasts alongside me again next season, Jimbo.
Oh, joys.
That's more like punishment.
Well, bloody has been this season, I'll tell you that much. Okay, I'll take it. I have one thing. I did say I was going to mention this. I have one thing, but I've kind of lost at the same time. I've done my groin in today because my missus wanted to have a race in the park.
I'm so glad that's how you done your groin in.
It was definitely in a park. We were definitely running. I won twice in 2 races, so that's good. But I've done my groin in, so you can add that to the injury list.
Injured on the pitch, injured off the pitch, Jimbo. What can we do? It's it's not good. Thanks to everyone who has watched the podcast this season. This season has been a tough season. There's no getting away from it. It's been a tough season. It's been a tough season to watch the boys on the pitch most of the time, and it's been a hell of a tough season to reflect on it and put podcasts out to you guys. Loads of you came up to me yesterday. Huge kudos to the guy from Australia who I really should have got your name, but we were all in a bit of a frenzy because it wasn't too far away from kickoff. But a guy came up to me from Australia and said he'd been to the Derby game, the Coventry game, the Bristol City game. Obviously, he got the right order, even though I couldn't. And he was at that game, and he watches all of the podcasts religiously. So, absolute thank you to you for that. And I'm so sorry that you didn't get the reward that you deserved yesterday for all the effort that you made to come over and watch that. And unfortunately, I dare say reliving it on this podcast hasn't helped much either. We do apologise. This has been a longer podcast than normal. Hey, thankfully we don't get relegated every week. So, the situation deserved a longer podcast. The good news is it's bank holiday today when you're watching this. You got all day to watch it. Just lounge around and watch it. And hopefully we've not ruined a bank holiday too much.
I don't know. I think we might have. Sorry.
I don't think it could be ruined anymore, Jimbo. That's the only positive to it.
Well, I've got no groin. I can't get about a place, so...
Haven't you got a fence to paint?
It's done. Oh, we've done this, haven't we? Yeah, it's done. The fence is done.
To the people who have been asking if we are going to do content throughout the summer, yes, we will. It won't be as regular as what it has been during the season. Poor old Jimbo needs time to rest his groin up. He also needs a break from editing podcasts every single week. And to be fair, we've both got families who have put a bit aside so that we've been able to bring these podcasts to you throughout the course of the season. But you do know exactly how to find out exactly when we drop any of our podcasts. Just hit that subscribe button and you'll know exactly when it happens. We will try and get some reaction from within the club in the not too distant future. That will be our next podcast. And then as events happen throughout the summer, we'll pop in here and we'll chat about them. And hopefully there's an awful lot of positives to talk about, Jimbo.
Well, fingers crossed, because it really can't have got any worse this season. I mean, this has been on the up and up for such a long time. I think that's probably part of it, that we're kind of coming to terms with the struggle of it. Not that, if you're longer in the tooth like we all are, that we haven't experienced this before, but extenuating circumstances that it wasn't really events on the pitch that were the main driving factor of at least that slip into non-league. So this is much more difficult to take, I think.
Yeah, this is the most hurtful of the 8 relegations that I've seen, and let's hope that remains the case throughout the rest of my Luton supporting life. Tom, thanks very much for coming on and sharing your thoughts, mate. Unlucky that you couldn't quite catch Claire in the predictions, but there's always next season.
Exactly.
As there is for the town. Really appreciate you coming on though, mate. Do come and see us next season.
Yep, thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. Thanks to the Barber Club and the Lower Level in Luton for hosting our studio, to Sean Grant and the Wolfgang for our intro music, and to Ed Smith Creative for all the designs that you see on set. It's been a tough season. The town are in League One, but do you know what? We'll be ready to go again when the fixtures come out. So until then, come on, you Atters.